What's up, bosses? Welcome to About Her Business, the podcast where we leave all the gossip at the door and get straight down to business. I'm your host, Jate. And today we have the founder of Brandy Worthy Solutions, Miss Brandy Walker. Now, Miss Walker's work is rooted in helping individuals and organizations build their personal brands through storytelling. With a background in education and being a life coach, Miss Worthy is also the host of Brandy Was Here, where she offers people the bite to tell their own true stories. And she's here today to help us write the script on what she means business. So, ladies, grab your cups and your notepads and let's get down to it. The meeting is now in session. Welcome, Miss Walker.
Yes, thank you for having me. I love that introduction.
Thank you so much for being here. Are you ready to get into it?
I'm ready.
Perfect. You've moved through education, fundraising, life coaching, and now you're helping build brands through storytelling. What do you believe has connected all of these chapters for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really relationships. I emphasize relationships in everything I do. And I think it's hard for people who are building something to see relationships outside of being just transactional. Because if you're building a business or you're trying to do something, you're trying to get to that next thing or that next level. You're seeking out people who can help you do X, Y, Z, who can help you grow. But relationships is the foundation of, I think, everything. So really being curious about people, getting to know people, who they are, what they like, what they're good at, what they're not good at, how they like to move, what they're working on has helped me to be able to transition from one thing to another because I think people see me as a connector. So I'm the type of person, if you tell me, hey, I'm starting a business and I'm looking for people who, if I'm out in the world and I meet somebody who, I'm going to connect them back to you, right? And it has always served me well. So as I was transitioning from education to working in fundraising, the people that I built relationships with in education stayed connected with me through the fundraising, through the life coaching, and even now into the business that I have where I'm helping people build their brand. I can think back to 10 years ago when I was in the classroom teaching. A lot of those people are still connected with me and I have done business with in all of these different sectors just because I spent time building a really strong relationship.
I love that. And I agree. Relationships are really the key to helping entrepreneurs, especially become successful. And networking is definitely on the top of that list for all entrepreneurs out there. So I want to ask, when did you first realize that personal branding wasn't just about being visible, but about power and alignment?
Yeah, I think when I interviewed for my first real job, I would say, because I had a lot of jobs. I started working probably I was 11 years old when I had my first job. I worked at different retail places in the mall. But once I graduated college and I had to interview for that first real job, and they were asking me real questions, not just why do you want this job, but asking me questions about me, like how I operate as a leader, how I took feedback, what would I contribute to a team. These are questions that I hadn't really thought about, but they were questions about my brand and how I showed up and what people could expect out of me as a person. And so I took that seriously. I left that interview and I wrote down some of those questions. I said, I really have to start thinking about who I am and what I stand for. Because when I go into these interviews, that's what people are going to be looking for. They can read what's already on my resume, but they want to know more about me. And so I started to think more deeply about that. My first job was a teacher. And after I got the job, I was thinking even further when students walk into my classroom, what do I want them to know about me? What should they expect about me? Am I going to be the strict teacher? Am I going to be the fun teacher? Am I'm the down to business teacher? Am I going to be the one that's prepared? And I really wrote out I want students to see me as a professional, right? I'm not one of their little friends and I come in here to play. This is a classroom. I want them to see me as professional, but I want them to see me as approachable, right? I want them to see me as organized and I want them to take me in this class seriously. So how do I then show that? How does that show up in visibility? I'm going to come to work professionally dressed. I know a lot of teachers are going to be wearing their sweatpants and whatever, but I'm going to come dressed right like I'm the principal. I'm going to start class on time to respect their time. I'm going to make sure that my agenda is clear for them. And so students would tell other kids, hey, you get to English class, you cannot play around. You need to have your notebook out. You need to have this ready and ready to go. And so I didn't have a lot of the issues that a lot of other teachers have with getting kids on board because I presented myself really in that fashion. And so as I started to transition to other jobs and other work, I was always very clear about who I was and those skills or those values that were transferable. When I left the classroom, I was still organized. I still showed up professionally, and all of the other work that I was doing, it didn't just leave me. That was a part of who I was. And even in my work now, people will tell you, I do not play about time. We say we start at 11, we start at 11, right? Because I want to value your time and respect you. So that's when I realized it was important. Every role that I have, it becomes increasingly important. When I talk to people about brands, yes, I primarily work with businesses, but a large part of a business is the person behind the business. So if you are the founder, the CEO, the executive director, et cetera, you have to have a personal brand that connects people back to your actual business. And it's not just being on social platforms or what have you. It's really about what can people expect out of you? Because whether or not you're actively building your personal brand, people are perceiving that brand. So people will say to me, "Oh, I'm not interested in building a personal brand. I do car detailing. People don't really care about me, but do you show up on time? Right? What's the quality of your work? How do you communicate to people? Do you have a process?" All of that is being reflected back on you. So then when people say, "Hey, do you know anybody that does car detailing?" You go, "Oh man, because Marcus is all he does a good job, but he's always late," right? That's a part of your personal brand. Or they'll say, "I really like when I talk to them, their emails are unprofessional," or "they never got back to me," right? People remember these things, and that becomes a story that people tell about you and your brand. So it's very important.
And Ms. Walker, you shared so much knowledge because even like showing up on time, that's a part of your brand. Making sure you're getting out assignments on time or getting products completed within a certain time frame. All of that is a part of your personal brand. And those were just some great tips that you just offered our audience. So, ladies, I hope you got all of those notes. Now, speaking of brand worthy solutions is described as boutique and strategic. What does brand worthy truly mean to you?
Yeah, I think brand worthy to me means being prepared to show up, right? And knowing that you have value to give. So many people will say to me, "Brandy, I like what you're doing, but I'm not ready for people to see me," or "I couldn't do that. I don't have the confidence," right? So it's knowing that you have value and being prepared to show up, whether that's online or in person, just you being prepared and knowing that your story has value.
And speaking of showing up, as someone who personally works closely with mission driven leaders, what's the most common disconnect you see between who people are and how they actually show up publicly?
Yeah, I think most leaders don't really know how they're perceived by other people. So they think they have to show up a certain kind of way and they really don't have to. For example, I was recently working with a client and I said, "You need to tell your story. You need to get out there more so professionally." They said, "Yeah, but I don't want to be on LinkedIn." Well, you don't have to be. No one's asking you to be on LinkedIn or be anywhere in particular. Or they'll say, "Well, people don't want to see me or hear my story." Well, people actually do. So they're not making the connections with their actual or intended audience to know what people want or what people are thinking. They don't know this because they're not putting themselves out there. They're not showing up. So they never really get any feedback. Right? Maybe they posted one video on Instagram a year ago and nobody liked it. So now they feel like, okay, nobody cares about what I think. So I think that's probably the largest disconnect. The other thing is I meet really amazing people who are doing really amazing things out in the world. And for whatever reason, they struggle to translate that in front of people or or online. So they come across as boring. People who have wonderful, amazing, lively personality. When you're in person with them, you can't get enough of them. And then online, it really falls flat. I think a lot of that is in their head. People are saying, "Well, if I'm doing a video, I want to make sure that I'm looking right at camera and I want to make sure that everything's perfect and I want to do all these things." And it comes across as you're not a genuine person, you're uninteresting, and then people don't tend to tune in. This happens a lot with founders as they're going out and maybe you're pitching your business or you're networking with other people. You get so caught up on saying the right thing and doing the right thing that you just cease to exist or be interesting and then people don't remember you.
You hit on several key points. Putting yourself out there and it falling flat or having that personality and when you get online, it just does not work or giving up. So a lot of entrepreneurs have to sometimes rebrand or reinvent themselves. So let's talk about reinvention for a second. It especially shows up in your work. What did beginning again teach you about identity?
Yeah, there's a certain part of your identity that is, I think, fixed. You kind of are who you are. But there's another part of your identity that you completely get to decide. How I show up in places, how I dress, how I talk, what I want to talk about, who I want to talk to. All of those things I get to decide. And at any point when I feel like this is not working for me, I can switch, I can pivot and decide to begin again in a different direction. I've done this throughout my career, right? I started as a teacher, and then I realized what I actually liked about teaching was the relationships. I wanted to coach, support, advise, and mentor people. And so I got into life coaching. That didn't take away from the good work that I had done as a teacher, but it helped me to clarify my positioning moving forward. In the same way that I do now, I help to build brands. I'm designing everything from logos to websites for people, but a lot of that is coaching. I'm helping business owners understand their business better. So it all kind of reflects. So I think people get nervous about starting over, but I try to remember that starting over is not starting from scratch, right? You're beginning again, maybe a little further along because now you have new knowledge or new experiences that is going to inform that next step. So don't be afraid to start over because you don't have to start from scratch. You can start from where you are now and decide that you want to go in a different direction in order to move forward.
And you spoke about your background as being an educator. So let's talk about you being an educator for a moment. How has your background in education shaped the way you facilitate conversations and strategy sessions today?
Yeah, understanding how people learn is so important, right? We kind of talked a little bit before this conversation about how you're studying psychology. So understanding how people think, how they learn best, better helps me because now I'm not guessing, right? I know that people are only going to remember about half of what you say. I know that people's attention span is going to be anywhere from 3 to 60 seconds. So I'm going to put the most important information at the front. I'm not going to do 3 hour long lectures and hope that they get it. I know that people need prompting. So every time I post something, I am including a call to action. Otherwise, people see a nice video or see a nice post and they move on unless I'm instructing and telling them kind of what to do. So it matters as far as it gives me an opportunity to not waste time trying to figure out what's going to work or what's going to land. I know based on science, right, what actually works, what actually moves the needle, what actually gets people to tune into certain things. So I can get to results quicker than I would have if I didn't have that knowledge.
Mhm. And speaking of strategies, we've talked about you using storytelling as a strategy. What shifts when a person stops treating their story as a background and start treating it as an asset?
Yeah, I think it just moves you into a better position when your story or the thing that you're trying to get out into to the world seems random or unorganized or that is unimportant to you. It's unimportant to them as well. So once you master your story, right, and you're able to put it out there with confidence, it starts to elevate in other people's mind as well. There's in marketing is really telling the same story over and over again, but in different ways. So when you're telling your story, I think people think they have to have. I was working with a music artist, and we were trying to build out his brand. And he said to me, "I want to release a new song every day." And I said, "Why?" Oh, because I need to put out more content into the world. Why don't we release one song, promote it every day in these different ways? You can do, why you wrote the song on one day. You can do a 30-second snippet on another day. You can do a breakdown of verse 2 on another day so that this story is ingrained in people's mind. But if you put out 30 songs in a month, people don't know where to go or what to do. And you don't know where to go or what to do because now you put out so much content, so much different content that people don't know what's important to you. So marketing is really driving home a message. So once you master your story, right? Master your story. What's the content of what you want to say, and then find different ways to tell that story that better positions you, right? That's your strategy. I have this message that I want to get out to the world. And here are the different ways that I'm going to put it out into the world is really how you start to develop a strategy. Strategy does not have to be complicated. It just has to be clear.
And again, we're gaining that access to ourselves, but we're also building a community. So let's talk about community and equity for a minute. In practical terms, what does equity look like inside of branding and marketing spaces?
Yeah, I think equity looks like consideration, right? So before I put out anything, before I go and build a strategy, I'm considering the impact of what I'm doing. I'm considering how certain people might view this. I'm considering if this is actually what I want to say, what I want to put out in the world, and if I'm okay with people misunderstanding or perceiving it. And being considerate of who this might impact or affect. And this comes up a lot with business owners too, when they start telling their stories. You may be comfortable telling your story, but now you have people out in the world who know you in real life and are might be related to you, and you're mentioning them in a certain way, right? The equitable thing to do, how can I tell this story without blaming, shaming, or calling out certain people, right? How can I tell this story that makes it my story that's true to me, but also doesn't say, well, that's because my mama, blah, 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 right? Like, how do you tell that story and be equitable? So considering all of these things that you may not even think that you should consider, right? With everything that's going on in the world right now, think about your content. Is now a good time to post this thing that you've been talking about? Because people are focused on and really concerned about this thing. Is this the best audience to share this with? Is this the best format to share with? So I think equity really starts with consideration and understanding the impact that what you're putting out there has on other people, not just yourself.
You hit on a really key point, which you don't see it a lot these days. You see people just calling people by names and calling people out, and it often ends up in lawsuits. So you just gave everybody a real great tip on how to tell your story without having to worry about the legalities behind
Right.
it. So you're also the host of a podcast entitled Brandy Was Here. And you highlight stories of starting over. Why do you think beginning again resonates so deeply with people right now?
Yeah, I think everyone wants to do it. Most people are afraid to. So having people share their stories about how they did it, really walking through the steps that they took, the emotions that they felt, and the results that they got is important because it provides a framework or a roadmap for other people to one, feel like they're not alone, but two, if they're ready, willing, and able to do so, that they can start moving forward on their path themselves. I started my podcast really as just people sharing wisdom on their life's journey because I felt like I got so much wisdom from the people in my life that I would consider unsung heroes who had no aspirations of ever starting a business or being TikTok famous or anything like that, but they really gave me knowledge, tools, and information that I use to be successful. And I wanted them to be able to share their stories for other people because I feel like you don't have to go through everything in life to get the experience and get the understanding from that. If we just talk more about who we are and what we've been through, people could learn a lot from other people's experience. So having it be storytelling based and also to interview real people in my life and people that I come across who I think just have amazing stories that they can share, not just stories of survival, but really people who are now thriving because of the decisions that they made is why I have a podcast.
Telling your story, you just never know who you may inspire to keep going. So, speaking of which, can you share a story either of your own or a client that reminded you of why your work matters?
Yeah, I always like to share this story. So when I first started my podcast, let me take a step back further. I wanted to do a podcast probably since like 2015, 2016, and I was still teaching at that time. So my thought was I was going to have a podcast with my student. And then when I stopped teaching, I said, well, maybe I won't do that because I thought my students they had so much to say and really had nowhere to express or put it out there into the world. And then when I stopped teaching, COVID happened. I started thinking that a lot of people have great stories to put out into the world. And so how I started was a friend of mine invited me to go live with her on her Instagram. And the feedback and response that I got was so overwhelming. People were, where can I hear more from you? And I had no real outlet to put it. And so I started my podcast and I like to tell the story because there was this woman, she was in her early 70s, a white woman living out in Texas. And I told a story about kind of reinventing myself and how I set boundaries with people, how I let go of the stigma of who I was supposed to be or who I thought I was supposed to be, how I had to get comfortable with letting people down and upsetting people in order for me to feel confident and to move forward and to live the life that I wanted. And this woman, this old white woman in her 70s from middle of nowhere, Texas, found my story and said to me, Brady, you really inspired me. I had a conversation. She was like, I schedule conversations with people in my life to lay down some boundaries and to let them know how I'm going to start living my life moving forward. And she has since, she's still working at that time. It's been like 6 years now. She's retired. I don't want to say denounced, but she realized she had grown up Christian and realized that a lot of what she learned growing up as a Christian was not the rules that she wanted to continue to live by. Her and her husband have since moved out of the country. She is living her best life abroad. And I always think about that because when I think about my audience, she did not come up in my thought of who I would be influencing, right? But being in her 70s to say, I'm not going to wait another day. I'm going to start living my life how I want to now, I think has inspired me moving forward because it's never too late to begin again or to start over again.
And thank you for sharing because you often don't know who your story will
Mm.
inspire.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you a question about when you sit across from clients who are down themselves. What's the first thing you help them to see?
Yeah. So the very first thing I help them to see is that it is something that they are going to have to overcome. It is not something that I can do for them. Unfortunately, a lot of people come to me thinking that I'm going to solve their problems, and that is not the case. I can help you identify them. I can help you build a strategy around it. We can come up with a plan, but ultimately, you have to do the work. And so, if you are struggling with self doubt, that means that you need to take action on certain things. And if you're not ready to take that action, nothing I say or do is going to help you overcome that until you do take that action. Sometimes people will disagree with me about what that action should be. And a lot of times that is coming from either they're not telling me the full story, two, there's things that they don't want to overcome or get to, or three, they're just not ready yet, right? They're not ready to address whatever that thing is. So the first thing I'll tell them is, are you ready and willing to move forward in this thing? Because if you can't get past that, nothing else that I present to you is going to make sense because you're going to look at it through that filter. And so often that's something that's work that they have to do on their own, right? I'm not a therapist. I am a licensed life coach, but in the capacity that I work now, I am not life coaching them, right? So I'm making it clear this is the area where you need to further develop and seek the advice or the guidance that you need in that area so you can come back to this stronger.
That is great advice because being an entrepreneur, you do have to have that self confidence and knowing that you will succeed at what you're doing. Now, another place that a lot of people lose a lot of self confidence is in likes and trends.
Mm.
Help people stay rooted in being authentic.
Yeah, you really have to know your why for doing it. So I work with quite a lot of content creators or aspiring content creators who their main focus is monetizing their content. And so they're focused on the likes. They are obsessed with the analytics of it. They get depressed if their video doesn't do well. Because I focus on storytelling, I'm getting back to the root. How can we ultimately build connections and relationships for the things that we're doing? What most people find hard to believe is that likes and things like that don't really matter as much. Going viral almost means nothing nowadays. That there are people who are considered micro influencers who have less than 3,000 followers who are making thousands and thousands of dollars from the content because they're able to connect with people and build community. So I would say you really have to check your why for doing it. Yes, you can make money, but maybe not in the ways that you're thinking. Not everybody gets a check directly from TikTok. Some people have built products or businesses outside of that where they're getting paid even more money than they would if they got paid by the platform. So if you're putting something out in the world, I always tell myself, and this is probably from my upbringing in church, that if I can help somebody, just one person, then everything will be all right. So what I'm getting, if I put something out and it only gets 10 likes, okay, out of that 10 people, one person now has said that has made someone's day better. One person has been served or they have learned something that they can move forward with. Even with my podcast, when I first started my podcast, I didn't have any kind of goals for how many people would listen, people just started listening. And I'm looking at the comments, I'm looking and reading the emails, and I'm seeing that, okay, this is helping people. So I will keep going. So getting clear on your why. If followers really matter to you, then that lets me know that your content is going to be very surface level. If you're really wanting to have an impact, then you have to start looking at different metrics that aren't necessarily followers and likes, but maybe something different.
You hit on all major key points, which a lot of people think that you're making the most money by having the most followers on these platforms or having the most likes on these platforms, when in reality, as you said, it's about building community,
Mhm.
Miss Walker. I want to ask, what does moving further and forward look like for you in this current season?
Yeah, progress is so important. So it's very important for me not to be stuck in the same place. I think it's easy for people, me included. I'm not talking to you. I'm right there with you. That it's easy for people to feel like you should be in a different place than you currently are. But every season, every level is building you towards something better if you allow it. Sometimes the reason why you're stuck is because you're trying to think too far ahead. People are always trying to escape where they are because it's not where they want to be instead of working towards where they can get. And so I'm constantly asking myself, what is this season teaching me? What am I learning right now that is going to be useful moving forward? What do I need to let go of right now? And really getting comfortable in the season. You're in Alabama, I'm in Chicago, right? And so it's hard. I'm a California girl and I'm in Chicago. I want winter to only be 3 months, and it's not, right? It's cold still, and it'll be cold through April. And so I can't make the weather hurry up and be warm because I wanted to. I have to really just sit and settle in the season and be prepared for it, right? I gotta get my heavy coat. I have to get my gloves out. I have to get my snow boots, right? To be settled in the season. And that's the same way in life. You have to be prepared for and settled in the season that you're in because that season is not going to move any faster because you want it to. So moving further and forward sometimes mean being in this place and being open to what it is teaching me before I get to that next level whenever it comes.
Let the church shout. Because that was some great advice, and I think you will put a lot of people at ease knowing that it's okay to be joyful in the seasons where you're not necessarily seeing all the money, because as long as you stick with it and keep believing in yourself, you will eventually get there.
Yeah.
Now, Miss Walker, we've sadly reached the end of today's episode, and we always leave with a legacy. And I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about this. When people think about Brandy Walker years from now, how would you like them to remember your work?
Mm, this is a good question. This is something that I think about a lot. I think one of the things that's really important to me is leaving a legacy, right? I have been doing some writing and some thinking about just my life in general. And I've been trying to do some research on my family history, right? There are names of people in my family who have passed on that I've been trying to research about. And if you go online and you do any digging, you don't find anything about them, right? And I think what a tragedy that is to have people who have lived a full life, right? And they're no longer on this earth. And there's nothing left behind to show what their life was or what meaning their life gave to the world. So I'm very conscious about that. This is why I want to be interviewed on podcasts. It's why I have a podcast so that I can leave a legacy. So that if somebody is Googling me or they come across Brandy Walker, they are going to see someone who not only lived a full life, but shared a life, right? Shared a life worth living. They'll see me as a risk taker. They'll see me as someone who was vulnerable. They'll see me as someone who was encouraging people. They will see my heart and how generous and giving I am without me having to say it. They'll be able to see it from the work that I've done and the people whose lives I have impacted. So legacy is really important for me. I want to be remembered, not just known in this lifetime. I want to be remembered and leave a legacy of the work that I have done.
Woo! That is very powerful, Miss Walker. Before we leave, we want to make sure we get all of Miss Walker's work. Let us know how we can sign up for brand worthy solutions. Let us know where the podcast is. Let us know all the deets.
Yes. So Everything related to the podcast, you can go to brandywashere.com. That is Brandy with the Y. You'll have access to a podcast, which is currently hosted on Substack. You'll have access to, you can read the reviews, you can go to our merch store, you can leave comments on everything. Everything is there. All things brand worthy solutions. So if you have a business or building a personal brand, maybe you're a creator or entrepreneur and you're trying to build your brand and get out there more, you can go to youarebrandworthy.com. Again, you'll see everything like my service offerings, you'll see case studies from past clients, etc. I'm also on social media. So if you want to go to Instagram or threads, it's at Brandy Was Here underscore. And I'm on LinkedIn at Brandy Nicole Walker.
Awesome. And we'll be leaving all that information down in the description box below. Any last words before we adjourn today's meeting, Ms. Walker?
I just want to say thank you so much. I'm sure your listeners hear a lot about what you do, and you do a lot. So no one may tell you how impressive it is and what great work that you are doing. But just having this platform, calling it about her business, is not just a title. You really are about your business and you are doing wonderful things out into the world. So thank you so much for having me on your platform, for asking really amazing questions and allowing me to share my story.
Thank you so much, Ms. Walker. I have truly enjoyed having you here today. And with that, ladies, today's meeting is now adjourned. Thanks again to Brandy Walker and Brandworthy Solutions for coming on and offering all her insights. Be sure to subscribe to About Her Business wherever you receive your podcast so you never miss an upload. Also, leave me some comments down in that description box on which industry you think I should interview next. Until next time, keep those goals tight, that circle tighter, and that bank account growing.